Hi, my name is Emily. I'm from Defence Force Recruiting, and today we are live from the Melbourne Defence Careers Expo. The Defence Careers Expo will be open to the public on Saturday 22nd from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. and Sunday 23rd from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Entry is free. You absolutely don't want to miss this opportunity to speak with current serving Defence members about ADF careers, to check out some of the amazing Defence assets on ground, including a Navy rigid-hulled inflatable boat, numerous Army vehicles, weapons displays, a command hut, and a Defence cyber zone. You can also have a go at our interactive virtual reality experience and flight simulators. There will be various info sessions held over the weekend, so you can ask any questions you have about ADF careers, and there will be multiple demonstrations from our ADF bands, Federation Guard and more. We'll pop the link for this incredible expo in the comments below, and you can also check it out on the Defence Jobs website. Today's Q&A will focus on engineering careers. I'm joined by three current serving engineers who are here to share their experience, expertise and advice on Navy, Army and Air Force careers. Stay with us, we'll be here for the next hour or so to talk all things engineering. So let's start with introductions. What is your name, what's your job role and how long have you been in service?
My name's Harriet Cameron. My job is an aviation engineer in the Navy and I've been in for 13 years.
I'm Captain Matthew Hume. I'm a systems engineer in the Australian Army and I've been in the Army for 12 years.
I am Flight Lieutenant Warwick Jones. I'm an electronics aerospace engineer in the Air Force and I have also served 12 years.
So there are a variety of entry pathways for engineers in the ADF. So let's discuss how each of you joined your respective service and why you chose your particular career path.
For sure. For myself, after doing 1 year of university, I joined the Navy and entered through the ADFA scheme.
And so why did you choose ADFA and how did that career progress for you?
For myself, started university in Tasmania, who unfortunately don't offer aerospace engineer. And so my passion was aviation, aerospace, and I knew that I had to leave the state. So I thought, well, why not do it with a whole bunch of other people who are leaving their homes as well? Yeah. So I went through ADFA.
So when I graduated high school, I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to join the Army. So the Army offered the Army Gap Year scheme. So I had a go at that, which was 12 months joining as a soldier. I worked in a Q store up in Townsville. Then after that, I decided that I did enjoy Army life. So due to my enjoyment of maths and physics, I decided to have a go at engineering. So I applied and got accepted at ADFA, and I studied electrical engineering there for the next several years before graduating as a lieutenant.
Very good, my turn. So I went straight out of Year 12 into the Australian Defence Force Academy. I'd heard a lot about ADFA during my time in school, and I'd done cadets previous to that, and that was quite well known through that scheme. And engineering was certainly a path that I was looking for, having enjoyed some of the technical subjects through school. It was almost inevitable, I think, to end up engineering, and particularly through ADFA. So that was my entry.
Did each of you have a really strong passion for the kind of subjects that you studied in engineering through high school that eventually got you to ADFA?
For myself, yes. Maths, always, just it's logical, makes sense. But I also studied music and languages through school, and then knowing that English was compulsory, not my forte, but still studied it along with physics and a little bit of chemistry in there as well. But mainly maths was my favourite.
I also had a pretty strong background in maths, so engineering was definitely something I felt comfortable with applying for. I also had an interest in power, or power generation, so that kind of threw me to the electrical sort of sway. My best subject actually at school was history, which probably helped me with the military side, but I didn't see a career in history, so yeah, that's probably a bit more for engineering.
I'm perhaps the odd one out. I wasn't particularly good at mathematics, but I did enjoy the concept of an engineering career, and I did like a lot of the subjects through, physics, for example. I did a little bit of music and a little bit of language as well on the creative side as an outlet, but I had to work on my math a little bit more. So.
So you don't need to be particularly maths-minded or, have top marks leaving school in order to look at an engineering career at ADFA?
Right, I agree. I think it's a lot about your attitude and determination. I think that was certainly in my case. I think I could see the end goal and I knew where I wanted to be. And yeah, it was just heads down, continue the study, and you do, and you make it through if you're willing to put the time in.
Probably a lot of being a problem solver as well for engineering. So maths is obviously a logical problem solving sort of exercise, but yeah, problem solving, if you find out that you're maybe not so good at maths,
Right.
you solve the problem by studying maths harder, I guess, and that's probably something that there's a lot of things in engineering that you won't end up knowing when you start. So having the ability to take that knowledge in and then learn it quickly, and yeah, that's probably a bigger, they'll get you further in engineering than probably a strong foundation in maths.
It's definitely as well, the first 2 years you'll have maths subjects within the engineering, but what that's prepping you for is the subjects later on that get really interesting, which might be hypersonics or theory of rotorcraft engineering, which is very heavy maths based. So if you already have that really good basis, and yeah, you don't have to be the top person in your class, but if you can still work hard enough to understand the concepts, you can apply it later on in the degree. Then when you finish the degree, you can actually just use it in the job, which makes it a lot more easier.
Definitely. So we do have a few questions coming through, so we will jump straight into those. Now, John has asked, what equipment do you get to work with as an engineer?
For the Army, there's a large, I guess, suite of equipment. So starting from vehicles, probably, which if you come down to the expo, you can probably see a few of, and there's some behind us now. For a lot of the weapons as well, the communication systems, so radios, there's probably the main ones that I think on the Army standpoint, but we've also got, yeah, so when I say vehicles, I'm talking about land and air, and also a small sea component as well for close to shore sort of operations. But you'll see them all at various areas of Army engineering. You'll be around and manage and also assist with design or acquisition of all these sorts of equipment.
I guess technically from an Air Force point of view, besides the aircraft themselves, there is a vast range of test equipment to make sure all the various airframes are performing as they should, and to be able to test all the particular systems, and then of course all the ground support equipment that helps through maintenance, etc. So right, sure, we've got the platforms themselves, but there is a wealth of background logistics and equipment which helps us to maintain those aircraft. So.
What about Navy?
For Navy, everyone thinks ships, which is definitely a big part of Navy. For myself, aviation engineer, we have helicopters in the Navy for our aviation aircraft, but one part where they interact is actually where the helicopter lands on the ship. So we have a lot of facilities that assist in the helicopter-ship interface. So there's technology in that space. But a lot of other things as well is where you might be able to get outside of the hands-on engineering and go back to the academic side and do further study with new or emerging technology as well.
Great. Sam asked, how long is the training for each of your job roles? I guess it would change by service as well?
Yeah, that's correct. So for ADFA, which is the scheme that I entered through, for engineering, so Army engineers will go through 4 years of academic study. So in my case, I went to the Australian Defence Force Academy in Canberra, as well as 12 months of training at the Royal Military College of Duntroon. And that's generally broken up into 3 years. You'll do, 3 years you'll be at ADFA doing your bachelor's. Then you'll kind of take what we call a hiatus maybe. You'll go over to the Royal Military College Duntroon, and they'll solely focus on your military training, what they need out of an Army officer. Then when you graduate as a lieutenant, you'll come back to ADFA to study for your 4th year, which includes your thesis as well. Afterwards, for Army, there is some minor courses that maybe for a couple more months. So I personally did my Logistics Officer Basic course, which is a secondary role for most Army engineers, is a strong foundation in logistics. So I did that for 2 weeks, 2 months, before going into my unit to start my role.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's right. It's important to echo the continuing training that occurs, particularly after, for example, the ADFA scheme. So you've got your 4 years at ADFA, but right, there is a lot of introductory and basic courses for engineers out there from an Air Force perspective, which looks at both maintenance, systems program office training, as well as logistics-based, which helps us to amalgamate into the new roles that we'll eventually fulfil.
I'd definitely say joining the ADF as an engineer, most times it's through a degree, whether it's ADFA or through another scheme. Once you've completed that, you'll also have your officer training,
right,
which each service has their own different method or style. And then there is specific engineer training, which for Navy, after you've completed your degree, new entry officer career course, NEOC, sorry, haven't called it the full title in a long time. NEOC, which is 6 months, then you learn how to be a Navy engineer officer, an engineering officer in the Navy, and that's all done at Albatross, where that training is just over a year, where we do more classwork and hands-on at a squadron, so trainee engineering officer, and that's where you actually get to see everything come together for the first time. You're at a squadron where there's 100 to 200 technicians, pilots, engineers, support officers. There's a bit of everything in a squadron, and then you sit a board to become qualified, and then you go and do your first job. So for us, it's a little bit longer, with degree, officer, and then just over a year to become qualified, and then that sets you on the path for the first job. So if you're going through ADFA or undergrad scheme, it can be 5.5 years before you finally do a job for the first time.
What component of training for each of your roles is practical versus theory?
Yep. So for most engineering degrees, even in the civilian world, you'll have to do an aspect of work experience as a part of that. So I think it's 30 days, 60 days?
6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Right.
Of military and then 6 weeks civilian.
Okay.
When you do it through ADFA.
Yeah, so that's a practical component of your engineering training at ADFA. Also, probably the main one that's unique about ADFA is your military training. So you'll find that that's very practical, because there's a lot of individual skills that you need to develop as an officer in the military. So weapons, tactics, pack marching, so your physical resilience. That's probably very specific to Army, I guess.
No, we have to do pack marching in ADFA too.
Digging, is probably another favourite one. But there's several kind of practical skills that all, I'll say, Army need to learn. So that's a very practical aspect. But also ADFA have the facilities to do, practical what we call labs or laboratory experiments and stuff like that. So the things that you learn in the classroom, you then get to practice, designing circuits, seeing so for electrical engineering, but designing circuits, signal processing and that sort of stuff. So physically applying what you've learnt and then being able to kind of see the end result of it. So, yeah.
I definitely had, through the degree, find that aeronautical engineering is quite theoretical. But in the last year of the thesis, I learned by doing rather than theory. So I chose a practical experiment and thesis where I got to spray some metal with hypersonic paint and then heat it and test it, which was quite interesting and a little bit different. And I always prefer the practical because I can see the difference and understand it better. So there's areas at the degree where you can do the practical thing. And then once you're out of the degree, there's definitely a lot more hands-on stuff where, for us, like I said, go to a squadron as a trainee engineer and you are doing the hands-on. And it's good to get in with the technicians to actually learn how to do something called lock wiring, bit of maintenance, bit of this, and actually see what everyone does in their own aspect of technical engineering.
Yeah, I certainly echo. I spent most of my time in my fourth year of my degree up on the roof of the university with a solar panel, taking measurements. So, but right, yeah, as soon as we finish the primary education and the degree, we are very much interacting at the unit level, and we're getting that experience, particularly from an Air Force point of view. A lot of the engineers go through what they call a professional development and training time frame, which is usually about 12 months. And they'll rotate us through various units of various calibre, of various activities, so we can get an appreciation of the various types of activities that are out there. And that helps us initially when we're eventually put into our first real posting, if you like, and our first real job, and then we have a basic understanding of what our fellow colleagues are doing.
Great. Yeah. Now we've talked about, I suppose, joining ADFA straight out of school as one entry pathway. Helen asked, can I join if I'm already studying engineering? So that is another entry pathway. Would you like to talk to that?
Absolutely. I think it's actually a very good entry pathway. It gets a diversity of education into the ADF, which ADFA has excellent aspects to it, but getting people from different universities means that people have been taught differently, people have different perspectives, and it's diversity of thought, which is a great thing to have.
Different teachers as well.
Different teachers, different people that you can lean on later when you become an alumni, when you graduate. And there's the Defence Undergraduate Scheme. So they'll sponsor for up to 3 years. And you can have, after you've studied for 1 year of a 4-year degree, you can join the military and be sponsored for 3 years, where you get a salary, you get the benefits of being in the ADF, which includes housing assistance and medical, and you get to do Anzac days and cocktail parties, whatever's in your local area. You also get to remain in your current location. If you can change degrees if that's the way that you're going. So there's definitely a varied range of opportunities for someone who is currently studying in a degree but still fancies a defence role later on after they finish.
And so if you're currently studying engineering, you think about ADFA, you decide you want to join, how does that, I guess, recognition of prior learning, does that come in?
So Engineers Australia, I believe, has several different assistants with the military to help with recognition of recognition of different universities. And I believe that can be, for Navy, it can be found on our Navy Education website, probably through the Defence Jobs, about which universities are recognised with a degree. It also helps if you have an international degree. So if you have studied overseas. But essentially, most of the engineering degrees that you study throughout Australia will be recognised within the ADF for engineering. There is a different specialisation for different jobs within different services, and that's where you can find that through Defence Jobs to actually see what degree you've studied, which will apply to which service, and what role that we call it within the service. So for as an aviation engineer in the Navy, you could have studied avionics, mechatronics, mechanical engineering, aeronautical engineering, avionics, I've already said avionics, electrical engineering. There's a range of degrees to be called an aviation engineer in the Navy, for example.
Yeah. And to, I guess, what that looks like at ADFA, so if you come to ADFA with previous university study under your belt, then the University of New South Wales or ADFA will work with you to work out how much of, I guess, you have remaining left, or what's worth you doing in terms of degree, and they will place you in the appropriate year level at ADFA. So if you came in, they might put you into a second year cohort because you've studied everything you need to study in your first year, and then they'll work out a tailored program for you to catch up with your military training, because you obviously still need to complete your first year level, I guess, worth of military training. So yeah, they do have that flexibility there.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, Matt, it was wonderful to speak to you earlier, to hear about your personal family history when it comes to defence, and to also hear about the different ways that obviously people can enter engineering. So let's hear a little bit about that now.
Yeah, my grandfather was in the army, so it was always in the back of my mind. Also, I had a pretty keen interest in physical fitness, and I saw the army as being probably the most physical of the roles. So in high school, I had a very keen interest in maths. Funnily enough, my best subject was actually history, which probably also influenced my military decision for a career. But I was quite maths-minded. There's also a science requirement for engineering, so I think physics and chemistry were two of them. I personally didn't take chemistry, but I had a reasonable interest in physics. So yeah, those were probably the main subjects that were relevant to my engineering. In terms of the different pathways into engineering within the Defence Force, there are several. I went through ADFA, so the Australian Defence Force Academy. So there are several engineering streams there. There were 4 when I went through. So there was mechanical, electrical, civil and aeronautical. I chose electrical because I had a small interest in power generation in school, so I thought I'd go along that path. But yeah, so that involved 3 years doing my degree. I then took a year doing my training at the Royal Military College Duntroon, and then when I graduated there as a lieutenant, I came back and did my 4th year, which involved my thesis as well for my bachelor's, and that's the standard way for most engineers who go through ADFA. So I worked in a small team. There's a centre of kind of excellence for engineering, so that's a central body, and we get loaned for indefinite periods of time out to different projects. So for a daily basis, I'm going through the requirements that Army wanted in their vehicle. I look at all the engineering requirements for that. Then I deal with industry and we organise a bunch of tests and verification activities for when they design their vehicle. I make sure that it looks like it should. Then we go through a kind of a verification validation sort of series of activities where we put the vehicle through a bunch of tests and making sure that they achieve what Army wanted them to achieve. And so all the equipment that's required to make the communications work, I make sure that they're up to the right standards, the right specifications by international standards and Australian standards. So new technology that I get to work on personally, so the vehicle that we're rolling out has what we call an integral computing system, the ICS. So Army has a lot of different systems that are made by a lot of different manufacturers, and they're made for different areas of the Army. So there's systems made for artillery guards specifically, there's systems made for infantry, systems made for signallers. But this vehicle is going to be used by all of them. Getting to study overseas is definitely a huge, and that was recent, but yeah, a huge highlight in my career. So I got to work overseas, I got to experience another country, and also I got to work reasonably closely with their military and see how they actually do things over there. It's a nice, like you'll find at ADFA, but being able to study and that opportunity without too much overhead in terms of Army work. So I was just a student, but I still, and my expectations on me was to make sure I got good grades and passed my Masters. But that was quite a highlight for me, was getting to live overseas for a year with my family.
So it sounds like a role that's been exciting and fulfilling for you. It also sounds like it hasn't always been easy, but that you have felt supported when it comes to study and learning. Would you say that's a key part of your role, is constantly staying up to date with industry changes and trends?
Absolutely. So in I think any defence job, but yeah, Army included, you do change your job roles quite often throughout your career. And so a lot of it is always new, and there's always a requirement to learn quickly so you can actually perform in your role, and then your boss and the actual rest of the team can benefit from your knowledge. So right now I am working in a technical role where I have to be familiar with a lot of international and Australian standards for a lot of different aspects for what Army want in the equipment that we're providing. So I've got to make sure that I'm familiar with them all so I can double check when industry provide us solutions to what we've asked them to provide, that they meet Australian and international standards. And that's a lot of reading and becoming familiar, and then being able to apply that knowledge to the documentation and the general packages that we're provided in terms of it. So yeah, it is a big part of it.
And that would be service-wide?
Yeah, defence in particular, and I know from an Air Force point of view, ongoing professional development is considered very important. And they're always looking to further you, and you see that through the job rotation and the various jobs that we get to do through our career. But yeah, in terms of courses and further study, lots of avenues to continue to enhance you as a person and as a capability for defence.
Have you had any opportunities to take further studies in your careers to date?
Yeah, I think
smiles from everyone.
No, I think we're all probably going to say something similar. But yeah, I was, and probably saw that in the video, that I was given the opportunity to study a Masters overseas. So I lived in the UK for 12 months, where I went to the Defence Academy of the United Kingdom in Shrivenham. And I got to study a Masters which was sponsored by Defence to gain knowledge in a particular area that they were interested in their personnel to have, which was military electronic systems engineering. So that gave me knowledge in radar, communications, electronic warfare, electro-optics, which is something that communications especially, it's something that I apply in my current role.
And how long were you over there for?
Yeah, so 12 months I was over there for. So
amazing.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, I got to take my family as well, which I did mention. And yeah, so we had a great time together, just experiencing a new country. We got to definitely deal with like a foreign military as well a lot, which is interesting to see how they do things. And and I'm sure we will all have reasonably similar stories about how enjoyable it can be. So
you also got the opportunity to work in the UK.
Yeah, but I was also going to mention, before I studied Masters in the UK with the Navy, I also was studying a Masters through the Australian Defence Force at Academy postgraduate scheme. So Navy, Army, Air Force, no matter what rank, what rate, what category, whatever you want to call us, we have the opportunity to do postgraduate study with ADFA, and that's through each of the services. So I was actually studying a Masters before completing a Masters in the UK, which actually helps with professional development. You get sponsorship to do 1 or 2 courses in a year via distance or intensive learning at ADFA, through ADFA, and it keeps you kind of on the ball of keeping the brain ticking over as well. And then applied to go overseas for one course, which is through University of Cranfield, for 1 year of studying Masters in Science in Aircraft Design. And I thought it was great because I got to be a civvy for a year, didn't have to wear uniform for a year, which was the first time ever. So it was pretty amazing. And then came back for a specific role. That's quite often what happens, is if you get sponsored, in your job to do further study for a dedicated period where that's what your job is to study, you'll come back into a specific role where you can apply that. For myself, it's where I'm currently in the regulations area, and that's the study was aircraft design, and now applying it for helicopter structural integrity. So it's very relative for what you study to then what you do the job in.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, you certainly sold it for me. I should put my application in for overseas study now.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
You've had an opportunity to study also, haven't you?
Yeah, not like these guys here. You know, there's certainly opportunities in Air Force for us to undertake various master's programs overseas, be it a software focus or a systems focus, or even as a flight test engineer. I've seen some of my colleagues go through that program in the United States. But I've really enjoyed some of the other smaller courses that Defence offers, both locally and with industry. For example, electromagnetic interference and electromagnetic control courses, which has become an interest of mine. I've got to do some training and some courseware in regards to that, which I've found quite fascinating.
Yeah, fantastic. So can you tell me about the training specifics of electrical engineering?
Yep, so it's a standard 4-year engineering degree, so you'll start off with your maths and your sciences. It's probably not too dissimilar what you'll go through in year 12. So I found that it's a good baselining. So you get students from all over Australia, and there are sometimes nuances in people's education. So it's a good baseline in your first year to kind of make sure everyone's on the same level at maths, on the same level in their sciences. But then there's also specialist subjects for electrical engineering. So that went into, so for me, design of electronic circuits. So understanding electrical theory, I guess V equals IR, just the standard equations that you're going to be probably applying for the rest of your degree. Also, with electrical engineering, there's a strong presence of computer programming as well. So you'll be familiarising yourself with several computer languages, so Java, C++, Python. That's, which I probably didn't mention previously, but that's probably a good thing to be interested in school as well. Before coming into electrical engineering.
I think I agree with that. I hadn't done any software or coding before entering into my degree, and that was certainly an interesting experience for me. But you learn it and pick it up. I learned Java, and that helped me with other software courses and applications like MATLAB, I think, which was used quite heavily. But yeah, a fascinating component of the degree. Yeah.
So from an aero perspective, not to scare too many people out there, it's, I'm not a coder at all, and one of the programs that we do use though is MATLAB, which will probably get taught through a few year 11, 12 subjects. So if it is something that someone is good at but not very good at coding for an aero, that's probably the good basis of what is a good background on is MATLAB. So not Java and C++. There's opportunities to do that if you so wish as an aero, but it's not a mandated requirement.
And then I guess signal processing is probably another a big aspect of electrical engineering. So understanding, what the electromagnetic spectrum's doing. So understanding how it propagates, what it can do, how to, I guess poetically, how to harness it, make it do what you want, or in terms of design and the things that it can, what we use from your mobile phones to radio communications, all of it uses signal processing to some degree. And yeah, that's another probably fascinating aspect of electrical engineering. And it's a very relevant one, I think, to the community now, so society.
A new part of the battle space to manage.
Yep, 100%.
Absolutely. And I guess a big difference when studying engineering in defence as opposed to the civilian world, particularly when you're looking at something like ADFA, is the opportunity to experience that military world and that military component. So outside of your engineering studies, what kind of activities or experiences do you experience within the military world in an engineering career?
Yeah, I'm very passionate. If someone talks to me about ADFA, I say, yeah, you've got your degree, you've got your military studies that can be a few hours in a week as well, but do other things. So ADFA offers a lot of sports and voluntary extracurricular activities, VCAs, which can be anything from community service to motorbike enthusiasts. Myself, it was hockey and rowing through ADFA, and now snow sports. Push that one again later. But doing something that is outside of ADFA, but as part of an ADFA team in the local community, and it can range from a whole bunch of things. And if they don't do something there that you are interested in, you can actually create a club as well through ADFA. So you can start something as well, which happens quite regularly.
Yeah, great.
I guess, yeah, with your academics in terms of, I guess, starting to integrate you into the military, they do introduce military training within your working week. So I think when I went through, there was definitely 2 periods a week, I think 2 half days a week, so a full day in total, of just specialist military training. So military law, military history, physical training, marching, all the good things that you'll see in, I think, most sort of military displays. But then also when it comes to your academic holidays, so what would be the same as your breaks in your semesters for civilian university, that's also another opportunity for the Defence Force to kind of give you specialist service training. I think that's exactly what it's called. So so you'll go away for weeks at a time to your relevant training establishments for your services to really kind of understand what the services do, or what the services require of their officers, and you'll go into your weapons training, your tactics, techniques, procedures, all the stuff that an army officer needs to have when they graduate, I suppose.
Yeah, wonderful.
Right, so that particular course for Air Force is down at the School of Officer Training down at RAF Base East Sale here in Victoria. And particularly from an APRA perspective, Air Force go away for little 2-week chunks down there, and to do all those basics, what we call the knives, forks and spoons course. How to be an officer and what that looks like. Yeah.
So there is a nice mix there of obviously your engineering degree in that engineering world, and then also the military aspect as well, and the ADF.
Yep, no, definitely.
Now, someone who's not on our panel today is a colleague of yours, Harriet, Lieutenant Tom Wilson, who is also a Navy engineer, but in a different role. So Tom is a Marine engineering officer, and we spoke to him out at HMAS Cerberus a little earlier this week to learn a little bit more about his job role and to hear more about the great opportunities he's had as an engineer in the Navy. So let's look at that now.
My role within the Royal Australian Navy is the Marine Engineer Officer. As an officer, the sailors, looking after their welfare, so any personal problems they may have, understand how they're feeling and to best help those members through tough times. In addition, as a division officer, you're also looking at training plans, how they can progress to their goals in life, whether it's professional or whether it's personal goals, and coaching and helping them through their career. There's a few different entry paths to become an engineer. I left school in 2010, finished year 12 and went to Deakin University to become an engineer. I did my 4 years of study and did a bit of work experience on the outside and finished my degree and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I liked the ocean, I liked travelling, job security was a big thing for me. And with my father being Army Reserves, I kind of had a history or introduction into defence life. So I looked into Navy jobs and applied as a Marine Engineer Officer. While I've been doing my training, I've had the opportunity to keep learning and training. I went and did my Masters through the Australian Defence Force Academy Postgraduate Scheme. So Defence paid for me to do my Masters in Project Management, which I just recently completed. In addition, I get to work towards my charge qualification, so my next part of my career. And there's always an aspect of training that's implemented into your career, no matter what rank you are. So it's good from the military aspect that there's so many options available for us. My training consists of joining and going to the new entry officer course at HMAS Creswell. That's 6 months of undertaking leadership and a variety of different skills. So you do the survival training at sea, you do weapons handling and a bunch of other exercises to help you become a leader and as an officer. From then I posted to HMAS Cerberus for 6 months and underwent a Marinised version of engineering training. All people who end up at HMAS Cerberus already have their engineering degree now. So they take those concepts and everything they know and we just marinise it. So when we go to sea, we understand the systems, how they work. The HMAS Cerberus is the largest training establishment we have in the Royal Australian Navy. There's a lot of different schools we have here. So we have the engineering school, both for the technical sailors and for the engineers. We have the School of Signals for the communications sailors. We have PTI school, we have the recruit school for the sailors that join up. So there's always a lot of people here under training. So we've got a number of demonstration buildings or buildings that have equipment in them. So one of them is the Marine Engineering Demonstration Building. It holds 6 diesel engines, there's a gas turbine in there, there's some running diesel engines, some generators, some switchboards. It gives the sailors the ability to physically work on the piece of kit, turn that theoretical knowledge into practical, be able to tinker away at those systems, They're there with instructors or senior staff members who are able to inflict faults or ask them questions so they get them thinking about the operational environment they're about to move into. Helps them with their training. What I enjoy specifically about my job role is the travelling. Every 2 years you change jobs, you go to different places. I myself, I've travelled to nearly every state in Australia besides Tasmania, all through work. So I've worked in Darwin, I've worked in Melbourne a few times, I've done training in Sydney and training in ACT. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of different opportunities. So I've done my initial training, I've gone to sea on HMAS Parramatta, did a few really good exercises with other navies, Spanish, the French, getting that insight into Navy life. I've posted to Patrol Boat SPO Darwin and responsible for the maintenance of the Armidale class patrol boats and the Cape class patrol boats in Cairns. I was also fortunate enough to post to an industry outplacement position at Australian Maritime Technologies. So we did a lot of design, consultancy work for the Australian Navy, for the Royal New Zealand Navy and a bunch of other shipping industries. So that was good to get that design experience. And now I'm here at HMAS Cerberus conducting down in the training pipeline. So I've moved down to different jobs and the flexibility is great. A person I would recommend to join the Royal Australian Navy is someone that's hardworking, isn't afraid to get their hands dirty, help out with whatever they need to do. The job itself, as I've said before, it's very flexible, so you're not stuck there, you're going to move around, so you're going to get great insight into different things going on. So if you like the flexibility, you like the travel, and you think you're well equipped for the job, I'd highly recommend applying and having a career in the Royal Australian Navy.
So certainly Tom has mentioned that he loves the flexibility and the opportunities that being a Navy engineer has afforded him. Warwick, would you say this is the same for engineering roles in the Air Force? Has that been your experience as well?
Absolutely. There's a big focus on flexibility and flexible work arrangements. Air Force and across Defence, but we value our people. They are what produce our capability. So Air Force in particular are trying to find ways to make sure that we can utilise our talent in a way that suits them, a work-life balance. For example, I can work with my supervisor in a sort of time period that best suits me and my family, but at the same time keeping the taxpayers happy. So it is quite flexible. Sure, we have to move around a little bit sometimes to various locations around Australia and overseas, but Defence does what it can to look after you and keep things as flexible as they can do.
Speaking on that, I have the perfect question. Hamish has asked, how is it juggling full-time military work and your social and family life?
I guess to start off, again, that work-life balance, as a Defence individual, sure, there are times that we have to do what we probably call overtime, but that it is made up. Your supervisor, chain acknowledges that, and you're provided the appropriate amount of leave in response. And I guess it's important to look after your people. You don't want to run them out. Otherwise, you can lose that capability. So it's definitely acknowledged.
I definitely agree. So, like I myself, I still play AFL. So I've joined a local footy club out near here in Victoria, where I currently live, and I also play in a band. I play bagpipes. So I can still commit to the things that I really do enjoy, and most of the time, I can, go away on weekends, go rock climbing or do a myriad of other activities that do interest me. There are times, I think, that Warwick mentioned that you will be away for courses or for work or for exercises or even operational deployments where you might be away for weeks or months at a time. But that is a sacrifice, but you've also, in the off time or in the time in between, you do get plenty of time to pursue the things that you enjoy most, which I definitely get the chance to.
Definitely say with Navy, my experience has been that you get some postings where they're a little bit more demanding, and then other postings which are a little bit more normal, 8 till 5, not quite a 9 till 5, but I think a little bit longer hours.
I'm a morning person.
Yeah. But I know that Navy was going through a push towards allowing people. One of the things that was coming out was a 20-year career over 40 years. So being able to come in and out of the Navy as permanent time, and then maybe part-time, back to permanent, leave without pay, and back in and out over a 40-year period, so that you can work in a range of jobs over a long period of time without burning out. As well as for me personally, I do my little sports, which is for me snow sports. And that's one thing where I socialise during that period. It's a good thing to still do what I want to do, but I'm also doing it with the Navy, and the ADF, going overseas, traveling with them, and on a normal week to week, when you're in more of a relaxed posting, you have your evenings free, you have your weekends free, you could do anything that any of your colleagues that might be working for a civilian company might be doing. Normal life.
Oh.
Yeah.
So a big question we have when people come through the application process is in terms of fitness and fitness requirements. So within the engineering world in ADF, where does fitness sit in there and how important is that in your career?
So for Army, there is just a standard fitness test that goes across all jobs, and there's a minimum standard you have to meet. So you can check the Defence Jobs website, obviously, for the exact requirements. But for, let's say, under 26 years old, 40 push-ups, 75 sit-ups, and running 2.4 kilometres in a set amount of time. Pretty sure it's 11 minutes, 18 seconds, or something like that. So that's the minimum standard of fitness that you have to maintain. They do test you every 6 months. But then there's specific roles that, let's say, infantry have, higher fitness requirements on top of that they have to maintain. So there's pack marching and several other components that are specific to their role. Engineering, there are, for, let's say, the corps that are more in a support role, there are some other sort of functional fitness tests in terms of being able to lift heavy things safely, still being able to wear your protective body armour, which is a relevant thing for operations to make sure that all personnel are safe. Doing those sort of functional things, there's definitely requirements to maintain your fitness to make sure that you're not going to give yourself injuries while you do that as well. So.
My fitness test is coming up very shortly. Air Force has one every 12 months. And look, I guess the test is not that hard. It's not that difficult, provided you put in a little bit of training, 2 to 3 hours of exercise a week, a little bit of arm day or leg day here, and a little bit of run on the treadmill perhaps, or a bit of cycling. If you keep a regular behaviour of exercise, then yeah, it's certainly more than manageable. Yeah.
For Navy, once you've joined the military, it's a different standard for before getting into once you get in. The standard is you should be able to do it at any time, any day, sub-maximal level. And once you're in, there's a core exercise, there's a arms, whether it's push-up or arm hang, and then there's a cardio component. And fortunately for Navy, we have quite an option. We can do a run, a swim, a walk, or a beep test. Okay. So the beep test is the standard one which all 3 services have. The run is quite standard between the 3. The walk, it is actually pretty intense. It's 5 kilometres within a certain period of time. So if you're not used to it, it's a quick walk. Yeah, it's a quick walk. But also swim test, being Navy. It's also, we find we have a lot of swimmers come through, and it's very relevant to our category, to our service. But essentially between engineering and military, you are a Navy, Army, Air Force officer as an engineer, plus you're an engineer. So there's the 2 components that work hand in hand, and for Navy there are different components that you have to achieve, which is your minimum fitness, leadership skills, other officer qualities that you learn through your military training, and then the engineering is what you get as well. So it's the whole military experience as an engineer is quite different to your standard job where you might join an engineer of another firm and do that one job for many, many, many years. Over your career, whereas for us we change constantly, we're constantly working with different people. When you're on the back of a ship and it's 35, 40 degrees outside, there's fitness running up and down stairs, not running, sorry, safety. So there's lots of different things that come into just a daily fitness. Plus when you're at a squadron, we constantly do sport as a group. It's a great team bonding thing. If there's not if you find that you're not very good at any particular sport, that's all right. The main thing that we do is give it a go. There's the minimum fitness, and then if you want to get involved in other sports, there's other things that you can do to keep up your regular fitness. Or you can become an elite sportsman, which some people actually do, which is great.
Or join the chess club. Oh,
yeah.
But in saying that, like those fitness standards, probably the ones that I mentioned, even all of us, like that's when you're a qualified officer. So when you first join, the fitness standards are a bit lower, and there is a progressive build-up throughout your training. So over your 3 to 4 years at ADFA as an engineer, or 5 years if you're an Army officer going through Duntroon, like they do start low, and they do build you up for it and give you the support you need to get you to the fitness standard that's required of every Army officer when on graduation.
Definitely.
It is important to note you are fully supported throughout that process.
Yeah, so it's not a case of, oh, you didn't pass, you're out. It's definitely, okay, you didn't pass, why didn't you pass? Are you feeling, maybe you're crook that day, or maybe you've injured yourself, and then there's also, they'll give you the support. They'll make sure that you go to the doctor, that you're taking care of yourself, and then they'll give you a chance to train back up to it, and then they'll retest you. And there's a series of retests that they'll do to help you. It's an attitude of kind of mentoring and helping you through the issues, as opposed to, nah, that's it, you're out, I suppose.
And indeed, I would say that's the case with the entire training component with engineering as well. When it comes to completing your courses and your exams and your thesis, for example, you are fully supported throughout that process. It's not just a fail and you're out type situation.
And engineering is complex, so there's I don't think there's too many engineers. Oh, there's probably some pretty smart guys, I guess, but I think the general engineering populace, they can't have gone through all their study without falling short in some regard or the other, which required extra study, support from your classmates, or support from the lecturers, all which is provided for you at ADFA. So it'd be quite a smart person to say that they blitz through it all with extreme
No help.
Cooperate to graduate is what we actually
Like that.
have all said at some point through ADFA. So it is a thing. You do a lot of assignments together. You're studying the tests together. So academically, there's that support, and ADFA does provide you a very tight-knit group. So in my course going through, there was 32 engineers on my course for one lecturer. So, which is quite different to my first year of uni, where I was civilian, and in the maths class there was 300 of us for one lecturer.
Right.
Other engineering was 80 students. So there is a very small, tight-knit group of you going through, all studying the same stuff, all having the same due dates for your assignments, and quite often it's group projects as well.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So what other kind of personality traits would you recommend someone looking at an engineering career?
Definitely someone who can work in the team. So I think, like we've talked about with our studies, that a lot of us relied on other students, or at least external help, to help us get through some of the hardest parts, and that's definitely something that comes back throughout my career. There's a lot of things that I need to know, and I have definitely not spent my time learning everything. So there's a lot of experts in specific areas that you're constantly going to be working with. So being able to communicate effectively, be able to ask for help, and be able to work in a team to help everyone achieve the same goal. I think that's quite a good trait, and that's something you can always often find in sporting teams. Someone who can play their role, which is probably a good term to use. I think a team player is a pretty good trait.
Your attitude and your approach to not only your studies but your future career, to those around you, it makes a big difference. You have to be driven, you have to be motivated. You've got to find out what motivates you from a defence perspective or an academic perspective, and really harness that. And a little bit of emotional intelligence certainly goes a long way. With the right attitude, I think there's no challenges that can't be grasped or solved.
Definitely want to echo the ask for help if you need it. There's in aspects within the degree, within further education after you finish your degree, and the areas that you'll be posted to in jobs, but also the physical aspect. We have personal trainers throughout the military, in the Navy, Army, Air Force, and in my experience have all been amazing. If you are, if you want to work on a cardio aspect or a strength aspect, they've always been amazing and happy to help, and push you that little bit harder than you might be able to push yourself. So it's in the terms of facilities that you've got access to, there's always a gym on base. The PTIs have always been happy to help with getting you to whatever fitness goal it is that you're trying to achieve. And there's peers who are always happy to assist you with discussing engineering aspects, which I'm finding my current posting surrounded by engineers for the first time ever, where we'll find some very interesting engineering conversations going on. What do you think about this? Very nerdy conversation.
I liked your point before, particularly from not only a military perspective, but from a professional engineering perspective. It's knowing what your limits are, knowing when you perhaps don't know the answer or the correct path, and it is putting your hand up. And that's very much encouraged, particularly with some of the engineering judgment decisions that we often get to make through the course of our career. It's important to know what your own limits are and when you do need to seek outside assistance.
Yeah.
So I think that's important when you go through recruiting is, I think knowing your limits. So not being someone, you need to know what you're getting yourself into, sure. So know you've got to demonstrate that you understand that you're joining the military, you're joining an organisation that, expects this, this and this and has this. But don't go in there saying, I know everything I need to know. There's nothing more that you can teach me, because that's obviously that's going to be seen through. You've got a lot of years, especially at ADFA, you've got a lot of years for the Defence Force to develop you into what they need you to have, and there's a lot of training that you're going to be given. So going in there with a mind of, this is what I do know, I don't know this, and I'm excited to learn about it. And I think that's going to put you in good steads when applying to join the Defence Force.
I definitely echo with asking for help. You never quite know who the subject matter expert is, and there's we're all engineers, two of us aviation, so we work with aircraft, and our technicians who are the subject matter expert on those aircraft who, touch, feel, tasting it, so to speak, every day. Hopefully not tasting it too much.
Metaphorically.
Metaphorically. Who are some for Navy sailors are technicians who have been working on certain aircraft for sometimes 20 years, and it's great just actually saying, asking them for, what do you think about this and what about this, and having a chat to the people who really know their stuff. So you never quite know where the subject matter expert is going to come from. But just be open that it might not be a peer, it might be in the chain of command, it might be a subordinate or a supervisor as well.
Fantastic. Now we have one last question for you. It's always my favourite. What has been your most memorable experience during your time so far in the ADF?
So I think I said it in the video earlier, but definitely the chance to study overseas. Obviously I've been on holidays before, but I've probably never left Australia for longer than 2 to 3 weeks. So 12 months was a big shock. You're cut off from your familiarity. Going to the shops, everyone's speaking the same accent. There's a lot of familiarities you don't really notice until you're actually living in another country for a long time. You're just kind of like, this is new. But I got to take my family. I got to study, which is something I do personally enjoy, is learning new things. And this was obviously subjects that I was quite passionate about. Working with new militaries, and there are things available in other countries. That Australia being quite a remote location from maybe where there's a lot of industry and stuff like that. There's a lot of opportunities given overseas where I guess manufacturing a lot comes from overseas. There's just a lot of things to see. There's a lot of history in the UK as well, which is something I mentioned earlier that I was quite passionate about. So yeah, that's definitely a highlight for me in my career.
Certainly I can relate to the overseas component. So although I didn't study overseas, I was posted for a job over there into the United States in Marietta, Georgia, down in the south. There I was a technical liaison officer supporting our C-130J Hercules and a large upgrade program that it's going through. Had the privilege of being inside and working alongside Lockheed Martin, a behemoth of an organisation and a huge industry partner for Australia. And to see their production line, to see how the US government works and how US industry works is absolutely phenomenal. And I very much value that I've had that opportunity with Air Force to do that and to contribute to capability and lead certification aspects for that platform. So there are memories and experiences there that will be with me for the rest of my life. Absolutely amazing.
Absolutely, yeah.
For me, I definitely find it, I'm talking to you guys and I'm like trying to think of one moment.
You can say more than one.
Yeah, so the first one that comes to mind is snowboarding in Europe with the ADF snow sports team competing against the British military for 5 weeks in Austria and France. That was pretty cool.
You won, by the way.
Well, okay, so they...
Attention.
Yeah. The British military, they actually have a posting to go ski for 6 months in Norway, so that they have a good advantage. Like, okay, come on, we get 2 months a year. So it's a little bit different. So that's one aspect. I have just come back from studying overseas as well, which was my hometown. I'm an immigrant from England, so for me it was going back home. I got to spend time with my grandma and godmother and friends that I grew up with, so for me it was pretty amazing. But I mean, I actually really enjoyed my first 6 months in the Navy, which was the NEOC component. I thought it was great. The first 4 weeks, you got to understand that it's hard. You're up from 5:30 till sometimes 10 o'clock at night. It's full on. There's a lot of stuff that you're doing. But I had a great time. The location is beautiful. You're right on the beach. You're surrounded by this perfect little island of, just being Navy for 6 months, and it's just great. We did a whole bunch of stuff and had a lot of fun, and so that was good. And then first time I got to go flying one of the Navy helicopters, I was like, as a passenger, not piloting, that was great fun. So, but yeah, definitely snowboarding in the military is pretty good. Done a few weeks away with that one.
They all sound absolutely incredible. Well, that's all that we have time for today. So thank you so much for your questions, everybody. And thank you very much for sitting with us today and answering them. Remember, you can jump onto the Defence Jobs website to apply online or to find out more information. Any other questions that we haven't answered, we will get back to you over the next few days. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.